Coming live from Denver, Colorado, USA is our guest this evening. Welcome to this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have famous podcaster Lindsay McMahon, co-host of All Ears Podcast, English All Ears English podcast, and she has also built a multiple six-figure online education business in language training with her podcast as a marketing channel. So we'll be talking about all that. Welcome to the show, Lindsay.
Thank you, AJ. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you, and it's a great pleasure to have you on the show. Your podcast is downloaded 8 million times per month globally and has been ranked in Best of Apple podcast categories in 2018, 19, as well as number one in US education language courses. And Lindsay and her podcast have been featured in Podcast Magazine, Forbes, and Language Magazine. So that makes it much more people will know now why they have to listen to you carefully, so that because it's very profitable listening. So straightway to the point of how one can build a good business online with the help of marketing as podcast marketing or marketing channel as such, if you can call that. So firstly, how do you see you are a famous podcaster?
Yes.
And people know a bit about podcast, but if you tell them different coaches and as well as businesses, small businesses especially, what would you tell them why podcasting is important, how it can value add to their businesses?
I think it's all about the person you're going to reach when you start a podcast. It's a different audience than a YouTube audience, a different audience than a social media audience. This audience is, they are well educated. They usually are quite busy. And so they're consuming your podcast in a way that it fits into your daily life, which I love that. I mean, I listen to podcasts when I'm walking my dog, I'm in the park, I'm driving somewhere. That means with a podcast, we can fit into their lives in a way that we can't with YouTube or social media. So that's the first thing. And podcast listeners, as I said, tend to be quite enthusiastic, quite loyal to their hosts. So I think because podcasting is very intimate, it's in our ears. I would argue it's more intimate between the host and the listener than it is on video. We can really touch our listeners and they can become really excited about our shows, addicted to our shows, and we can influence them and help them along their way. So I think it's a very influential medium. It's not flashy like social media is, but it's powerful.
Right. It's powerful, and it becomes more powerful when you actually start knowing the right ways to use it. And you have used it to build a big business, online education business, as I've said before.
Yes.
But one thing very interesting that I see in your podcast and your business is that your podcast is All Ears English is the new and fun way to learn American English. And then you have translated all that understanding of podcast into building an online business. How did this work out? You are not a business podcast as such, and that shift seems very empowering for a lot of people and very informative, inspiring for a lot of people who'd want to use a podcast as a big marketing tool. So tell us about this. When did you come to know that you can build a business around this, and you are actually sitting pretty where you are at the moment?
Yeah, that's a really good question, AJ. So what I would say is the most powerful thing to build a successful business is not being a business builder originally. It's understanding one thing. That one thing is your market, your audience, your problem you are solving. We know that the problem we're solving is English language skills for international professionals. And I entered this podcast business. I built this business already having, 5 to 10 years of experience traveling the world, teaching English as a second language in Japan, in Buenos Aires, Argentina, in Guatemala, in New York City, and in Boston. I had worked with hundreds of students already. I knew the problems in my industry. I knew why traditional classrooms were not working for adult international professionals, global professionals. That style didn't work. So when I started my podcast, I didn't know much about marketing. I didn't have an MBA, but I knew the problem and I had an idea of how I was going to solve it, how our podcast was going to take a different approach. And that is, I would argue, way more valuable than having an MBA, because now that I have a P&L, I can have people help me build my P&L. As I move into my business, as my business gets bigger, yes, I need to fill in the gaps, and that's done through reading, taking online courses, hiring people that can run pivot tables and run spreadsheets for me, right? I can fill in the gaps later, but I have to get my start knowing my market. So that's how I would answer your question, AJ.
Okay. Okay. So basically, you knew that there is a market for learning the things that you are talking in your podcast.
Yeah, and I knew that of course I knew there was a market. I knew there's a huge worldwide market of adults who need to learn English for business or just English in general, for communication, who are immigrating. But I also knew there was a problem in that market. And the problem was the methods that were being used were not working. Traditional methods of textbooks and classrooms. And so I already had an intuition about how our business was going to be different. And that's really all you need. You don't need an MBA. You
Right.
don't need to be a business builder. You need to understand, and you also need empathy for your target customer, your listener. I think about my listeners all the time. Right? I have deep empathy for them, what it feels like to be living in the US. Maybe you're from Japan or India or anywhere, and you're living in the US and you just can't connect in a business context or in with your neighbors. That's painful, right? And I have empathy. I want to solve that problem for them.
You have put that very well, Lindsay. And in fact, a lot of people will also be able to understand. And this word empathy, as I see it, it's getting diminished in all areas of our lives as we go by. Even the word is not coming that much often.
Hmm.
So it's nice to at least listening from you this word a couple of times, more than a couple of times onto a podcast like that. And I know you actually mean it. That's why you have been able to build up a business like yours. But for general people, there are two ways. Let's look at it. Somebody who is wanting to start an online business. So, what should they become a podcaster first, or they? How do they use those tools that podcasting offers? How do they? And second thing is that a lot of people who are podcasters nowadays, and so many are trying to monetize it. Monetizing is a big issue. It's a challenge for the podcasting community, but they many are not able to look at their strengths the way that you have looked at. And I'm sure in whatever way things that they are talking, there is some gap down there, some solution that they can offer in that market. So what would you tell these two segments of people how to use podcasting to the maximum, utilize, bring out all the benefits and use it for their growth, for their business, and actually solve problems for themselves?
Well, so to answer your first question, I would say that if you know what business you want to start, the question is, should they start a podcast? I would ask myself, the first question would be, is my audience there? Do they listen to podcasts, right? It's not the whole world that listens to a podcast. It's not mainstream yet. It is becoming more and more mainstream in the US, but internationally, it's still in the upswing. So does my
Right.
audience actually listen? So look at the demographics of podcast listeners in your country. Are they actually there? They might not be there. If they're not there, are they on YouTube? In that case, you should start a YouTube channel. And then the second question is, do I like podcasting? Right. So that's the other important piece. We have a YouTube channel. Yes. But I prefer the podcast. I prefer
Right.
our podcast. I like audio. I'm not
Right.
really a video person, and I get really bored if I just have to be in front of a camera by myself. I need you, AJ. I need our connection, back and forth conversation.
Right.
So, how do you express yourself best? Some people express themselves, in a more visual way through Instagram. Maybe you like to make amazing, beautiful posts on Instagram, or maybe you're more into forums on LinkedIn, and that's where you can spread your message. For us, podcasting is just the right medium for the way we like to communicate. So, it's those
Right.
two questions. Is my audience in the podcasting world? And do I communicate well through a podcast? Or would I be better on a video or on TikTok? Right?
Right. And for a podcaster, how do they know that they can, actually start and creating value for themselves by, bringing the same stuff to their audience through a course or any other method, rather than looking at, at waiting for some advertising money, or
Mm-hmm.
in terms of merchandising, selling some merchandise for someone else. That's a totally different way, and perhaps not a great way at looking at their podcast. If they are able to solve a problem like
Yeah.
you did, you created something much valuable than what
Yeah.
yeah, others are doing.
Well, I think I would never start, I wouldn't, as a brand new podcast, I don't recommend starting and saying, I'm going to monetize through ads, because you do need a critical number of downloads. I don't know the exact number. I think it's between 10,000 and 30,000 downloads a month, possibly more, to really truly start to talk to sponsors, start to get ads. So that is not your first goal, right? I think your currency in the first year is actually not even related to money at all. So you need to be able to start something where you don't have to make money right away. Your currency in the first, few months is email exchange. So you need to build your email list. That is the value. And in exchange, it's not about asking, what can I get? It's about giving. You need to give, and just give as much as you can to this audience. And yes, ask for the email by creating some kind of a smart lead magnet. We
Okay.
offer quizzes, which is a great way to engage our listeners a little deeper than the podcast, get them more involved in our email list, and offer them courses eventually, or other ways to engage with us. But in the beginning, it's just you're surveying your audience to understand what they would want, and you're getting emails on your email list, collecting that, and then maybe you can start offering small products. But it's a long road, right? This is not something where I would say I'm going to have ads
Right.
within 3 months. No way. No way.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Right. So somebody who has, suppose if they want to expand their business, online business, if they are there and use podcasting,
Yes.
how do they do that?
Okay.
Because
So, mhm.
from your example, if you can, go a bit back in time and explain that, how did you use podcast as a marketing channel, so that
Yes.
even if others they are not getting into podcasting, they can, use that tool much better, and those podcasters who are into podcasting already can take their understanding further to know exactly how better they can market their strongest point and create something much more bigger and better for them, and not to worry about them, not need to worry about monetization.
Yeah, there's a lot we can do. It depends on what kind of business we're trying to build. So, are you trying to build a coaching business where you are charging $1,000 plus for packages, high-end one-to-one coaching? In that case, you're not building a scalable company, right? You're building, and that's great. That's fine if you love that. So, you don't need 1,000 customers. You need 10 high-quality customers that will continue to renew with you. So, that kind of person is doing something like building their reputation through their podcast. They may be trying to parlay into speaking gigs, presentations at conferences. So their podcast becomes more of a business card where they're, showing off their expertise to get something else like a speaking gig, or having live events where they will then invite the attendees into coaching programs, right? That's kind of the more one-on-one consultant business. If you're looking to build a more online education company, which is kind of more in the direction of where we've gone, then you are going to go ahead and focus on, any opt-ins, lead magnets, like I mentioned, quizzes,
Okay.
free video courses. You're going to engage them, your listeners, onto your email list, and then you're going to build, online courses. So online courses are, the market is becoming very flooded, but it does depend on what industry you're in, of course. So this is a great way to build a course, continue to update it, but you don't have to necessarily offer your time in exchange for money. You're able to scale up your company a bit more. Does that make sense? So
Yes,
it just
yes,
depends on
yes.
what you
Indeed,
want to do. So
indeed.
first question, ask yourself, what kind of business am I building with my podcast?
Right. So, how do you differentiate? Should you consider your podcast as a business and as a marketing channel at the same time? How does it work? How do you segment your mind
Yeah.
at the same time being a podcaster?
So it depends on, so I think of it as a couple of different options. You're either kind of building a media company, and that would be the model where you're engaging more with sponsors, with advertisements, and you are focusing on building that top of the funnel, which is the audience, right? It's the numbers of your podcast. That's more of a media company in my mind. And you're putting more energy just into the podcast itself. You're trying less to move your listeners into a funnel and into a course, versus the other model is more of an education company, right? Or kind of an information products company. This would be scalable, but in that case, your podcast is purely a marketing channel for the eventual education that you want to offer to your audience. And then you're building out your education ecosystem. It's not just one course, it's multiple courses or products, right? So that you can continue to engage them in the long term and help them achieve their goals, right? So those are kind of two, that's the way I see. And then there's also the higher end coaching option, which is kind of a third way. But I see kind of those three buckets as, but you just need to know what you want to do. You can do all three of these things. You can even do them all at the same time in theory. But it's good to
Right.
be clear on what the podcast is for.
Right. So if podcast itself is a marketing channel and you are using it for yourself, suppose, what about the third parties, outside parties, businesses? I'm not talking about advertising here. The
Mm-hmm.
businesses who can tie up with and actually use your marketing channel
Yes.
to, yeah, to rent your audience, man, is a very crude way I see it,
Mm,
but to actually utilize utilize your channel to reach the right people who are also their potential customers. So how
okay.
do you engage with them? How does that discussion work out? Because they are great uh, people who understand money, market, and
Mm,
marketing, and here
mm-hmm.
you are just a creator. So there is a
Right.
mismatch of abilities in terms of negotiations, that too about money, the commercials part of it. So what
Yeah.
would you tell the naive podcaster here?
Well, it sounds like you are talking about sponsorship, right? So you're talking about partnering
No.
with a big company who wants to
Yes,
essentially
yes,
get the attention of your audience, right? So
yes.
that's kind of that's a sponsorship. There's also the route of affiliate deals, which I don't really like affiliate deals. And the reason for that is, many times what you're giving an advertiser or a sponsor is two or three things: brand awareness, brand reputation, transference of emotional like excitedness around the brand. If my audience is excited, they love my show, and then if I mention a brand, there's transference that happens onto
Right.
that brand that you can't put a number on that. If they don't go to that coupon code, type it in, that's just not a fair deal, I think, for the podcaster.
Right.
You're giving that brand so much more than just a coupon code entry and a direct response purchase. Okay, so I don't love affiliate deals. Maybe when you're getting started you could do that. So your question is your question about partnerships, kind of partnering with big
Yes,
brands? Yeah.
partnership. Yes,
Yeah.
where you actually get some sort of a good commercial deal. You
Yeah.
are only selling your time. You are only selling your effort, your energies that you are
Mm-hmm.
putting onto the show, and not actually selling your podcast in terms of the quality of content that you are producing. And if at all you are endorsing anything, then that's the time you put in the disclaimer that this is a partnership. This is a different sort of a deal.
Right. So you're saying that you're going over and partnering with them. You're not necessarily bringing your audience. So I'm a little confused by your question.
Yeah,
So
no,
let's
no, no, no.
imagine, yeah.
Your audience is already there. That's why
Okay.
somebody else
So
from outside is coming.
uh-huh. So you're bringing a brand onto your podcast, for example?
Yes,
Yeah. Okay.
yes,
So, right.
yes.
So we've done this before. You have to be careful with this. You have to make sure that this makes
Right,
sense for your audience. The number one most important thing is always your listeners, right? And if you go this route, you're going to ask yourself this question every day. Is this good for my listeners? Be careful with your audience. Take care of them, right? They take care of you, you take care of them.
right.
So we've done things. For example, we have done custom sponsored interviews where we will invite a CEO of a company that we have partnered with, if it makes sense, and we'll have that CEO come on and tell their story around the narrative that then ties in with the brand and ties in with maybe the product, but it's not all about the product. So no one's going to come on my show and do a 15-minute commercial, right? I'm not going to let that happen. I want to know that CEO's history. I want to know about a challenge they had in their lives that ties in with what they created eventually. That's how we make that work. At the same time, I've done some co-hosted webinars with brands where with them, we make an outline for the content, we make the slides, and then we present it together alongside each other. So I bring my
Okay,
audience, they bring theirs, and
okay,
that becomes kind of a co-promotion thing. These are two
okay,
models. Mm-hmm.
okay, okay. And do you declare that there is money involved? What about the disclaimer? How does the audience understand that this
Mm-hmm.
is not pure regular show that you
Yeah.
do, and
Mm-hmm.
this is something where where you are in a way endorsing something?
Yeah. So, as much as possible, we try to remember to make that announcement. We let them know that their company is sponsoring us, this month, for example, and we've invited them on the show for this special episode to kick off this sponsorship. So we try to be as upfront as we can. We try to do that in our ads as well, right? So just to announce, hey, this company is sponsoring All Ears English this month, and then we talk about the brand. So yeah, as much as you can, you don't have to overemphasize it. You don't have to say
Right.
it 5 times. You say it once when you introduce the guest, right? At the same time, we also have CEOs on from companies that are not sponsoring us at all. It's just a nice exchange where I
That's
think
fine.
they're interesting, and I'll invite them on because I think they
Right.
have something to share. So
Yeah.
in my mind, ideally, we don't want to feel much difference between those two types of interviews, right? We want to feel that it's all content that's going to serve our audience.
Right. Right. Now, my one more question around this is the vision part.
Yep.
Like, you might be having a vision. You are doing very well. You have got great number of downloads. You have a company which is running an online business which is doing very good. Where does your vision, how do you keep watering your vision, and your vision
Mhm.
can change? So to understand from you, where do you want to go, and why are you looking at going there? What is your vision? That
Yeah.
is going to give some understanding for others also, because when success is there, you sometimes your vision may just get blurred. That's why
Yes.
that becomes more important. So
Well, I
what's
mean,
yours?
my original vision, the most important vision, comes back to I want the message of All Ears English. And by the way, our message is connection, not perfection. So our style, our method of edutainment, we want to reach billions of people around the world. So
Okay.
whether we do that through YouTube or podcasting or TikTok or whatever it is, I don't really care ultimately. I want to reach billions of adult English language learners who their lives depend on having a career where their English is dependent on that career, right? So they need to succeed. English matters for them. I want to help them. That's number one. Second layer is I love podcasting. My team loves podcasting. By the way, this is not just me. I have a team of other podcasters, and we would never be here. Michelle and I, and Aubrey and I on the
Right.
podcast, Jessica over on our IELTS Energy podcast. We couldn't do it alone.
And Michelle is from Boston. You do it from New York City.
So Michelle is from New York City. Michelle does it from New
Okay.
York City. I'm now in Colorado. I used to be in Boston. So we move around. So it
Okay.
depends on which episode you're listening to. You hear where we're from. But we do want to build out our podcast offering. So we want to build out new podcasts to serve different people. We just launched a new podcast called Business English from All Ears English. So if your listeners go and hit search, they type in All Ears English. They will find 3 podcasts. Number 1 is All Ears English, the big podcast, 8 million downloads a month. Number 2 is Business English, just for those career professionals who need English for their work. And number 3 is the IELTS Energy podcast, which is for anyone taking the IELTS exam. Maybe you've heard of that exam, AJ, for immigration or for education abroad. So we want to build out more podcasts in our network. We want to have a network based on edutainment, education, entertainment for global people, for people who think internationally, not just within our own countries, in our whole world together. Connection. Yes.
Nice to know about your vision, actually, because Lindsay, because you see, if I see it, then it's the vision of a teacher.
Yeah, I think it is at the core. I mean, I'm still a teacher in my heart, and I can build a business because I can fill in the gaps, right? And that's the message for your audience. I think at our core, we need to, coming back to what we said in the beginning, AJ, we have to have that empathy for our student, our listener, our audience, and understand the problem, understand how we solve it differently. And then we fill in the gaps. We read the business books. We attend the seminars. We learn how to run the formulas, right? But we have to know our audience.
Right. It's nice to know teaching is such a nice, noble profession, noble work. And if podcasting can take you to where you actually wanted to be doing what you actually wanted to do, except that you have used other tools present in your time, that is as wonderful and beautiful that can happen to anybody. So very, very nice to learn that, and also to understand that there will be a lot of people who will get to learn so much on that, and especially this business English thing.
Yes.
It sounds very exciting. How do you manage this? Because as you said, I don't know how much from a business background you both are, but how do you manage the teaching the business English part to the audience?
Well, some of the things that we have done is we actually invite a lot of people on for interviews. We actually built an entire, as we talked about, online courses. A few years ago, we built a course on business English. And what we did is we surveyed 100 people we knew who are active in the corporate world, Silicon Valley, health tech, education technology, all these different areas, law, right, accounting. We surveyed them and we said, what are the words that you use every day at work? Give us the words. So in that case, one of the problems in my industry, which is what we're trying to solve, ESL, ELL, is that we go to the textbook. Even the teachers go to the list. There are many, many lists online, right? And those are not the real words that are used out in the business world. Those are the words that ESL teachers are teaching. And they are not necessarily business professionals. So we wanted to get the real words. So in that same tradition, we also interviewed professionals in the course. So we invited them into the course and we said, hey, let's have a 10-minute interview. We're gonna have some value on writing emails, giving presentations in English, attending meetings in English, talking to your boss, giving feedback to your subordinates. Right? We cover all these topics, but we cover it through the information from the people doing the work, not necessarily from us. Then we have our opinions, our unique angles. I have a lot of opinions on business as an entrepreneur, right? This is business too. And so we bring all that together. That's what we put into the podcast and our courses on business English.
Right. So just for my understanding, maybe this whole world, there's a lot of use of British English, Queen's English,
Yes.
and you talk more about American English.
Yes.
People have their own ways of looking at both the things. You have an option on your laptop computers to choose which one you like. I sometimes tend to choose both of them. Coming from India, we generally have grown up learning about Queen's English. So in terms of people learning from you people, does this question come up? And if because there is a huge number of population who still, how do you bring those two different sort of English together and make sure that everybody is comfortable around it?
Yeah, it's a great question. So yes, 85% of what we teach is American English because we are all from the US. And that's our style. We're going to teach American slang, American pronunciation. But if you go to our podcast, you're going to find, gosh, probably at least 10 to 15 or more guest episodes where we've interviewed our business friend, our friends who speak British English.
Right.
So some of my favorite podcasters, Jack Askew, Luke from Luke's English podcast. We have friends that speak Australian English, British English, who have their own podcasts and their own brands, and we collaborate with everyone. We know everyone in our industry. We love them all, and we invite them on, and we compare American English and British English, American English and Australian English, New Zealand English, or we compare all these things together. And eventually, if we decide to build a course in British English, we can bring onto our team a teacher of British English, and we can fill in the gaps that way. But yeah, we do feature guests using British English, but our main focus is American English and American business culture.
Right, right. Great. Great to learn about all these aspects of, learning English, about building a business, about around teaching English to the world. So how do people reach your podcast? How do people connect with you? How do businesses connect with you and gain as much as collaborate with you, do interviews with you? How does that work? How
Yes.
what ways they can connect?
That's a good question. So our website is allearsenglish.com. So allearsenglish.com. Now, if people are listening to this on a podcast in their favorite podcast app, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all they have to do is hit the search bar right now, type in All Ears English, and you're going to find those 3 shows. Subscribe to all 3 or subscribe to All Ears English, the big show. Subscribe to Business English. Just hit follow on these 2 shows. And if you're taking IELTS, subscribe to IELTS Energy. And if anyone wants to send me a direct email, I'll go ahead and let your listeners know what my email address is. Is that okay, AJ?
Yeah, perfectly all right. Great.
Okay. So my
Great.
email
Thank you.
is okay.
Yeah, yeah, carry on.
Okay, my
Sorry.
email is lindsay@allearsenglish.com. So LINDSAY at allearsenglish.com.
Right. If you tell me, I can also add the same to the YouTube description so that people can
Yeah.
easily reach you.
Yeah. And we have a channel in YouTube also. So if they're listening in YouTube here, they can easily just type All Ears English in the search bar in YouTube and find our channel. So
Perfectly all right. Great. Thank you so much, Lindsay, for your time, for giving us this great lesson in not just about English, business English, but also how to use podcasting as a marketing channel and make your lives better. Either you are a business or a podcaster. Thank you
happy
once
to
again.
help. Thank you, AJ. Great to talk to you today.